Good evening, Galaxy fans. My name is Matt Gray from The Striker, and this is our premiere episode of Trafico Radio. Here with me tonight is my co host. He's the LA Galaxy beat reporter. Say hi to Alex Ruiz.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. Thank you for joining us and having your time today.
So, first of all, before we get started, I wanted to thank my good buddy Gio Garcia at LA Soccer Hub. He's the one who really got me on the horse and got me doing podcasts in the first place. And then, he always gave me helpful encouragement and constructive criticism when I asked. So, thanks to my buddy. And then, our goal in this podcast, we really just want to we really just want our voices to reflect, what goes on in the press box. I mean, there's a lot going on. We don't just cow down food and tweet and stuff. There's a lot going on, and we want to take a slice of that world and give it to you guys. And then but also be patient because this is our first podcast. We're gonna have ups and downs, and really, this is just the beginning of a long journey for us. And for me personally, it'll take me some time to find my voice and figure out what I'm doing personally. So, yeah. But other than that, I can't wait to get started. I know there's a million Galaxy podcasts out there, so we want to keep it entertaining. We want to keep it educational sometimes with the analytics and the stats. Alex will help out with that. And then there's some times where we need to be very serious and say things that just simply need to be said, and that's why we're here. So, Alex, your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. Shout out to Gio. I was on his podcast, LA Soccer Hub, for a while. A couple of years back. I think this podcast definitely is something that we want to give you fans to have more content about the LA Galaxy. I do as much as I can to write about the club, whether it's news, whether it's analyzing things, whether it's features. I mean, just today I published something about me talking to Joe Totino, kind of his thoughts of Apple TV and getting ready for his new year. As he's not the primary broadcaster for the club anymore, but he still does a radio feed, and that was a great conversation that we had. So I'll be doing my best on this podcast to kind of get more of my thoughts from my articles and trying to give that more content to you guys, because as a Galaxy fan myself growing up, I wish there was so much content about the club. So that's kind of been my mentality when it comes to my coverage. What would tiny Alex would have wanted to read or get into, and really dive into the like Galaxy stats, tactical things. So I want to give that what I wish I had to you guys, and I'm hoping I'm doing a good job so far, and we're ready to get this show started.
Man, we got a confident Alex over here. I need some of that to rub off on me. All right. Well, let's get started. The first two games, they definitely haven't been pretty. In fact, the standard of play has been pretty not fun to watch. Which leads into maybe our first topic, which is sort of our biggest takeaways from the first two games. I had a bit of a rant on the subject because there were more than a few fans sort of scoffing at the idea that some of us were suggesting the team would be good, or at least that they had a solid core this year. And, that's really missing the nuance of the situation. The Galaxy have missing pieces. There's players with fitness concerns. There's injuries. Chicharito's out. And, the Galaxy have no width. All of this is compounded by the loss of Julian Araujo. Um, it was nice to see Lucas Caligari at training today. He's the new right back signing for the Galaxy. But I was talking with Alex off camera a second ago about this. Sometimes as reporters, we don't have to be cliches. We can just kind of say it how it is. And you can have the argument whether the Galaxy should have so many missing players. That's an argument you can have. But at the moment, for the next month or so, until they integrate these new pieces and until they have a more complete team, you're going to see the Galaxy struggle out there. And so that's something that, we need to just kind of realize is just going to happen right off the bat. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think you definitely hit the point on it about the team kind of being incomplete. I think we see the roster so far, where last year we kind of saw the team play a more 4-3-3 formation in games. This year, it's more of I wouldn't say it's pragmatic, but you have a lot more midfielders. It's definitely a lot harder to get that width, and although Cabral never scored and he definitely struggled in front of goal, he was able to get the ball in good spots, and that not only benefited him trying to score goals, which he ultimately couldn't do, and which is why he's no longer with the team, but it also helped his other teammates around get into the space, attract defenders, being able to open up the game in other spots that may have not been open before. And I think right now this team, still trying to get Tyler Boyd back to fitness, potentially looking into another winger to get on there. Douglas Costa, the winger DP, is injured. There's definitely a lot of question marks about this roster, and I think this has been a gentle reminder that this season is not going to be easy when it comes to injuries, when it comes to the more games being played due to League's Cup, when it comes to having to build that back line again with the departure of Julian Araujo and potentially adding a new left back in Julian Aude. But right now, I think my biggest takeaway is that this team is really, really one or two pieces away from being a good team, a team that we saw was okay playing on the front foot, that looked comfortable in possession, that could be able to spring attacks, be able to open up spaces, see the runners get to the end of balls. I think we're maybe a month or two away from maybe seeing this Galaxy team really, really explode and get into their stride. But right now, it's just gonna be do the best what we have so far, and I think that's kind of the mentality so far with the club.
Alex, you made a really good point with Cabral and Grandsir. If you were to ask Galaxy fans, would you keep these two wingers and struggle, or would you rather scrap them and then ideally start over? And then when you look at the context in which they made the trades, they got rid of Cabal and basically axed that entire million in GAM that they had to suffer as a result of the sanctions. Grand Cyr, they transfer Grand Cyr to France, and then almost a million in salaries off the book. So these are good moves. And then, I actually reported this at the Striker a few weeks ago, but the Galaxy internally, they're prioritizing making the right signings over panic buys and over early season results. That's important. And then, like I said before, another kind of subtle but important point to make is that if the team's going to be poor, we should definitely be premature about making judgments on, like, say, for example, Dejan Joveljic. He's had a few starts. He hasn't done great. And there's been some criticism. I saw him in person versus the U.S. in that January friendly at the bank. He was lively, but he was getting the ball. He had only one touch inside the box versus Sporting Kansas City.
He didn't have
Um,
any actually against Sporting Kansas City. He only had two against Dallas, so he's had two touches in the box in the span of two games.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the point. If he's not getting service, then we can't really judge him. So we need to calm it down a little bit and realize we're just only 2 games into the season. So
Yeah, for sure. I think that kind of goes with Efrain Alvarez as well. I think a lot of people I've seen a lot of negativity towards him, and I understand like when he told me at Coachella like, "Hey, I want this to be my year." Like I understand there comes that pressure with it and that expectation from the fan base that hey, we want to see you step it up. And unfortunately, we haven't really seen Efrain Alvarez have a solid impact in any of the two games. There's not been one moment where you can say Efra's looked goal dangerous where he's looked like a catalyst in trying to change the Galaxy offense. I mean, we just mentioned Dejan Joveljic not being able to get a touch in the box. I mean, Efrain Alvarez has a lot to do with that. When you're left-footed playing on the right wing, that's essentially the best position for you to be to whip in a ball into the box, to shoot, to be able to play make with other players, but he hasn't been able to do that. And the same can go with Melvin Rodriguez, who, was brought in this past offseason as a free agent, primarily a midfielder, came from the Houston Dynamo, and he's being asked to, stretch the field a bit at kind of that left midfield spot, and that necessarily isn't getting the best out of him. And you can tell that the Galaxy don't really have true wingers out there. Efrain Alvarez loves to play in the half space, loves to cut. He doesn't add much width. Not to mention he's not going to be the type of guy who runs on the shoulder of the last defender or will make a darting run because from when I look at him, he just doesn't have the work rate to do that consistently. And the same can go with Memo Rodriguez. Again, you're asking, him to be something that he's not. And Efrain Alvarez can't be what Greg Manny demands out of the winger position. So they're kind of just stuck here. And I feel that's kind of what this season feels like so far through two games. They're kind of just stuck in this place and kind of waiting for the reinforcements to reignite that engine and be able to get moving and moving up the standings and do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's a struggle to look for positives. Although one big positive that we've seen so far this season has been the play of Jonathan Bond. Now he hasn't been perfect. His distribution has been iffy at times, but he had a almost career high 11 saves versus Sporting Kansas City. If he, when he's on his game, he's an elite keeper, one of the top keepers in this league, and the Galaxy need that right now. I have noticed that typically when Bond gets more shots at him, that he tends to play better, which is something that you
You know
kind
what?
of
Now that you
expect.
say that, I'm kind of noticing that the more that they kind of barrage him, the more he somehow seems to, just get a hand parry off of those balls. Wow, I just realized that. Wow.
We're both keepers, of course. We're gonna figure that out. But all right. Is there a player that you think has actually been the other way around? They've performed quite poorly so far this season over 2 games.
I wouldn't say over 2 games. This might be kind of a reactionary take, but I think that Chris Mavinga in the game against Dallas was really underwhelming. I think you're kind of expecting some to have a veteran leadership in the back with Cáceres and Mavinga. I mean, Cáceres has been to 4 World Cups. He's played in the biggest games in the world, and you have Mavinga, who was a key part of Greg Vandy's Toronto team, and I think in 2018 to win MLS Cup. And you'd expect that he's a bit more aware. He's a bit can read the game. And against Dallas, Jesus Ferreira, Paul Arriola, Alan Velasco, they were just able to run in behind him so quickly. I think that third goal of the game, where Ferreira just runs in behind of him, and Mavinga just is kind of stuck on an island in no man's land, kind of watching that play unfold. He's kind of been disappointing, but again, I know it's reactionary because it's only been a 90-minute sample size. I'm still going to give him time, but that's kind of maybe been my biggest takeaway, like negative takeaway so far, because he's a guy that they invested in this offseason, one of the first signings of the new league year for the Galaxy, and to see kind of his first impression not really be the best, it's not going to set off my alarms. For sure, there's like 30 more games to go in the year, but I think that's not what you want to see in your first game, where Mavinga and Cáceres kind of just look lost. There's no chemistry really there, I think, and I think the Galaxy defense, we all know, has been an issue for the last couple of years. And when Jalen Neal stepped up against Kansas City, he at least looked a little bit better. He looked better on the ball. He looked, Neal has that athleticism. He's just 19, so he's has more room to run. He's able to cover. He's a tall kid. He's can win those aerial duels. And I think the pairing of Neal and Cáceres is a little bit better. They fit better together when it comes to their IQ and their athleticism than the pair of Mavinga and Cáceres that we saw against Dallas.
Yeah, Vanny's words specifically at the beginning of preseason was that Neil was going to be the backup to about 3 other dudes, and then Mavinga. Ideally And I sparred with fans online. You want Mavinga to play himself out of the position so that at least once he hits the bench, he's motivated and he's still you don't bench the guy after 2 games after signing him to the LA Galaxy because I mean you're gonna destroy his spirit and then I mean that's not gonna help. You want to keep the guy in ideally as long as possible until Neil's ready. Where it's difficult is that he was so poor in the past 2 games. You're kind of already at the point where you want to make the switch. And I mean, we saw Jalen Neal. He was at training today, and he was one of the people who spoke, and that strongly suggests that he might get another start this weekend. And so it's interesting. We're gonna have to see how that goes. But
That's true, but like it's early season. You do kind of don't want to have that recency bias when it comes to these first 2 games. At the end of the day, I think Mavinga is probably going to start more games than Neal. I think Vanny's been really careful with him when it comes to these last 2 years, when it comes to playing him and giving him those minutes. And I think Neal is ready for it, but I think Vanny's going to slowly work him in a bit more, get him acclimated to starting games, coming off the bench. I don't think Neal's going to be a locked like a pendant starter every single game, but he's definitely like a player that everybody wants to watch, everybody wants to keep their eyes on, and see how he progresses because he's a highly touted talent, not only in the Galaxy but for the U.S. national team as well.
oh yeah. Let's move on to the LA Vancouver game. The home opener, unlike quite any other. Now we got the quotes late, but we did learn that Javi and Douglas Costa will take the field for training next week, so they won't be available. Sega's back after 10 days. Vanny said he was still getting his legs under him, so he should be available in theory. And Gasper will be available over the weekend. Now, my prediction is that this is going to be an ugly, ugly match. And the reason I say that is because the Galaxy and Vancouver actually kind of have the same problem, which is neither side has any width whatsoever. Vancouver, they've been deploying the Christmas tree 4-3-2-1 formation, which is ultra defensive. And Vancouver's kind of, I don't know, they're somewhere between underwhelming and depressing. I mean, they have 1 point from 3 games. They've been underwhelming on both sides of the ball. Again, they can't create width. That limits their ability to create possession. The only way that they've really been dangerous is to create turnovers off the press and to just sort of hoof the ball up to Brian White and just hope he creates a moment of magic. Now, against Dallas, they were able to create 2 or 3 opportunities, but again, if the Galaxy defense just holds, they should be able to take care of Vancouver. But it's a weird game because I mean, it's a game that they should win. So if they win the game, then it's they haven't really accomplished anything. But then if they lose, what I like about Corner of the Galaxy? They always have these knickknacks, especially Kevin Baxter and Sophie. But if there was a bad result in the game, then you might potentially have a real dumpster fire in the Galaxy's hands. But um, let's see. I mean, they have a really good keeper, Yohai Taioka. He's been keeping Vancouver in their games, and to their credit, they do have a talented roster. It's just not very cohesive. They, their coach Vinny Santori, he's a nice guy, but I don't know that he might last a season if they continue with this form. So,
Yeah,
uh,
I mean, you can call this game like the battle of mid. I mean, both these teams are not amazing. They're not gonna, knock your socks off when it comes to what we've seen in these first 2 games. But I think Vancouver has been a little bit more frustrating because they've had opportunities to win games. I think, were leading against RSL in the first week, and then they lose that lead and lose 2-1. And they've been a team that can, has showed the potential to be dangerous. They just can't finish. They've shown that there's frustrations about not being able to get these results. I think both these teams are really motivated to get a win. I think for the Galaxy, because they're the home team, they're gonna have that pressure to do that. Not to mention they have better players than Vancouver. Uh, Vancouver wishes they even had a player like the caliber of Ricky Puig, but they don't. And I think this is a game where if you really need a player to step up and somebody that needs to kind of show what they can do that we haven't really seen a lot of so far is Tyler Boyd. I think if he starts this game, he completely changes what the Galaxy can do because if I knowing Vanny who likes to play inverted wingers and Tyler Boyd who's right-footed, he's going to start on the left-hand side. He's essentially going to replace Memo Rodriguez. And I think Rodriguez has really been lacking when it comes to getting the ball inside the box, making those runs. He's really good in possession and getting into good spots to do 1-2 passes, being able to open the left side for Raheem. But we all know that Raheem Edwards tends to get caught up forward a lot when it comes to bad giveaway in possession or when it comes to losing the ball himself. I think if you put Boyd in that position, who can be in the spots where Raheem Edwards usually is, and he has to push up there because he's the best player best fullback. Between him and Leardom, they give the best width on the team. So Raheem Edwards has been pushed in that position and put in position to get the ball in higher positions when, if they lose it, well, he's going to be the one that gets singled out because he can't recover or he's just not there in time or he loses the ball. But I think Boyd, if he can play on the left hand side, be able to make those runs in behind. I mean, we saw in Coachella and in the preseason when he started that he's got the speed that he can, be on the shoulder of the last defender, that he can make the right runs to get on the end of balls. It's just that in the regular season so far, we haven't really seen that. We've seen him play maybe 15 minutes in each of the last 2 games. Coming off the bench, and I think it's great for him to get his legs ready, but it's not a great sample size considering the Galaxy were either behind or chasing a goal or being bunkered down by Sporting Kansas City in the last game. So I think if Boyd plays this game, he has to play a critical role, and I think he'll change a lot of the Galaxy, and I think that really helps out Joveljic, who we talked about, who has struggled to get touches in the box, get that service. I think Boyd can provide that to him, and it's going to be up to Van if he decides that Boyd is ready to play and start a game. He doesn't have to go 90 minutes. He can put in Memo after maybe 60, 70 minutes. But I think Boyd can really open up the space for the Galaxy. And, if they can get a couple of goals at halftime or even the lead at halftime, I think Manny will be satisfied with that and be able to have Boyd ready for next week, take him out a little early, and kind of see him prepare and get ready to take on that role on that left wing side.
They desperately need them. MLS is a very physical league, and you need horses. And if you can't stretch defense, you make yourself the most predictable team ever. So, spot on, Alex. Now, I guess we should move on to the elephant in the room, which is the supporters boycott. Uh, Now, Lars is having a protest at Legends Plaza at 6:30 ahead of the game on Saturday. They're encouraging fans to bring signs and to protest. There's a quote from the Galaxy Discord that I thought I would share, which is, "My biggest wish for this game is that the boycott is decisive. I want it so empty in the supporters group sections that it's an embarrassment and the Galaxy feel the pressure." My opinion, I've been asked that a lot lately, and it's a nice cop out to say I'm a journalist and my opinion doesn't matter. But, I do have a column called The Gray Area, and it's my job to find a nuance in difficult situations and to sort of tell it how it is. And there's, again, a lot's been said, but the club can ignore the boycott and the supporters, but for us as reporters, as people who have to interact with the fans and sort of act as a conduit, it's difficult. It's almost impossible to ignore the boycott. I can't seem to post anything positive on social media without crying out in the comments. And the longer that this boycott goes on, the longer it's going to affect the club. A case in point, and I'm going to go over this briefly, is the club's countdown to kickoff activation. You know, I was talking about with some other reporters, and it's hard not to get the impression that the list is a little underwhelming. I mean, for starters, Monday, Eric Zavaleta at Nikki Sports. That's fine, but when I talk about how this boycott affects the club, you know, it seems like when I look at these series of events that the Galaxy are sort of in bunker mode, that they're trying to not make a big splash. And I'm looking at this, and there wasn't a lot of promotion for this event on Monday at Nikki Sports, and so uh, imagine for 5 seconds that you're Nick, and this is where I'm going to get a little serious. Imagine for 5 seconds that you're Nikki Sports. Do you want to really be associated with the Galaxy's sort of plan to keep things as quiet as possible? I mean, I'm sure if you invite a LAFC player like Mahala Poku or something, and you invite him to Nikki Sports, that place is going to be packed, and they're going to advertise it, and it's going to be a big deal. There's gonna be people who show up who buy jerseys in the store. They're gonna attract business. It's a win-win for everybody. When you have this event and you don't put as much effort into it, there's gonna be question marks. And so Tuesday there was a Twitch stream with Daniel Village and then some of the Galaxy, E players, and then all right, Wednesday is the bad one. That's where they had 23% off one item at the Galaxy Team Store. Okay, when they didn't even have a discount for jerseys, and it's like, all right, how am I not gonna roast you guys a little bit for that? And then Thursday there's a happy hour at Absolution with Juninho, Marcelo Sarvas, and Rafa Garcia. And I don't know, I guess to relive the old glory days. I I don't know. You guys can tell that I'm kind of it's kind of a depressing list. We and this is where it affects everybody. I really do feel for the fans in this situation because it seems that from the LA launch, the launch of the LA kit, and this countdown, and then even the game on Saturday, Galaxy fans, they need to enjoy their team, and they need to just relax a little bit and just, you know, have some fun without all of this stuff affecting them. And uh, my takeaway from all of this is that the Galaxy as a club, until they get in front of this boycott, because we all know that they're not going to get rid of Chris Klein, right? They're not going to get rid of Chris Klein. But until they get in front of this boycott, until they do that, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And that's just a situation that's the hole that they've dug for themselves, and it's the hole that they're going to have to dig themselves out of.
Yeah, I think for me, I think it's like a lose-lose for both, for the Galaxy and the fans. One for the fans, I think, um I think the events, you just mentioned this week, they're not gonna knock your socks off. I like you mentioned, if Mahalo Poku was at Nikki Sports, right, I think that place would definitely be packed. I think, Eric Zavaleta is definitely a player who, he's from El Salvador. He's a player that, has played in this league for a while, but he's not one of the exciting players, up and coming players, on this team. And that's no disrespect to Eric Zavaleta, but I mean, if you really want to promote this home opener where you know that a majority of the sporting sections are going to be empty, might as well bring a player who can at least, grab some of, the neutrals, guys who are on the fence of coming to the game who've never been to a Galaxy game, right? And I think that's kind of a situation where you need to be able to kind of promote that a little bit better. I think, for I think I'm they're gonna have WWE posters going out there, and I think that's great and all. But I think in the grand scheme of things, we need to notice how this boycott has got the attention of all of the Galaxy fans. Everybody who follows this team is aware of what is going on. Everybody is aware and knows their intentions of what they're trying to do. And I think it, kind of just shoving this under the rug and trying to do some things to be able to get as many butts in the stadium when we know that a lot of the supporters groups won't be there. And I think for the supporters group as well, like you said, Chris Klein is going to go anywhere. And I admire what the supporter groups are trying to do, their goal, how they're trying to achieve this. But in the long run, I think AEG is willing to let that happen and keep Chris Klein there than actually make change. It's really really rare when you see a club listen to fans like that, because it sets a precedent of how powerful they can be. And I think keeping that precedent is something that's really important to AEG, but also to every single organization that owns a football club. I think everybody knows that the fans do have a voice, but you got to set a limit of how much they affect the team and decisions that go on. I think it's a really interesting scenario because I don't think this has ever happened in the history of the LA Galaxy, where you're really having a staring contest between the front office, the club, the ownership, and the fans, the supporters who create the game day atmosphere, who make the experience what it is at Dignity Health Sports Park. And I think for fans who are coming in to games who don't know what's going on, it's gonna be such a weird look, especially when you look how on the LAFC side of things, everything seems to be going well there. And then here at Dignity Health Sports Park, it's just a mixed bag of emotions where it feels kind of like everything's not necessarily falling apart, but you're starting to see the cracks and starting to see where parts of the game day experience are lacking when it comes to not having supporters groups, when it comes to fans kind of being upset and not content with what's going on, and especially right now with the team not really playing too well. But all those factors combined are really going to affect kind of what happens to the perception of this boycott, and what eventually happens, and if there's a resolution to what goes on. But again, that's a major if, and I'm just ready to kind of see where this leads to between the clubs and the supporters.
Yeah, I mean, I, I think what people want to see is they want to see Chris Klein own up to his record. That doesn't mean you have to fire the guy. It means maybe just a tiny little bit of transparency would be nice because, I mean, put the guy in front of an audience. Let him defend his record. This doesn't have to be so painful. He, I know that's debating it on a live stream. That's where it gets kind of messy. But again, if you until someone does something, we're just going to be stuck with this weird situation. And maybe that's what's so painful is to play on the field and to play and what's going on off the field. It's the same thing. It's just one long waiting game. We're waiting for players to arrive. We're waiting for this some sort of resolution to this supporters boycott. And I think that there's going to be a big crowd there on Saturday. This is the time for them to really make a statement, and this isn't a preseason game. I would like to maybe get some numbers on how many tickets have been sold for Saturday, but I mean, that's another guessing game too. I don't really feel confident saying that tickets haven't been sold. When I checked, some sections hardly any tickets left. Others they were full. Some they didn't. They kind of gave you the impression that you couldn't figure it out. It's going to be one big guessing game, but it's going to be something on Saturday. So to conclude, we did have a rumor. A 28-year-old winger, I believe his name is Adamir Santos.
Yep, Ademir Santos
Alex,
from Atletico Mineirao. If you know that team, that is currently where ex LA Galaxy player Christian Pavon plays. So there's the LA Galaxy connection there off the bat. He's a left-footed right winger. Like I said earlier, Vanny loves inverted wingers, so he'll definitely be playing on the right hand side if he comes to the Galaxy. Mike mentioned 28 years old. Definitely an interesting player because in Brazil, some of the major clubs they tend to stack on talent. It is very attack heavy. Those teams have a lot of depth. In 2021, when Santos was playing for a club called America in Brazil, had 13 goals, 3 assists in 29 starts for the club. So generally good goal production there. That season earned him a transfer to Atletico Mineirao. He's played I think 30 games, but only started 15. Has 2 goals, 0 assists during the 2022 season. So it's definitely not a player that I think is horrible. But a player who is not having that consistency of starting, of having a game plan around him and centered around him. I think that definitely affects his play as well. And I think when it comes to Brazilians, we know how technical they are, the flair that they add to the game, how they're good technically on the ball, and I think that's really important when it comes to getting what you want out of your wingers. Cabral, when we saw him play, wasn't the most technically gifted player. There's a lot of times where some touches were a little bit off, where he kind of maybe made the wrong pass or the pass wasn't executed well. And I think being able to have a winger who's technical and has that athleticism to be able to sprint and run down the end line, make those runs. That's extremely important. And when we're talking about right wingers, Efrain Alvarez has that technical ability, but he just doesn't have the athleticism to play that position in the way Vanny wants. And I think Santos would be a great addition to have on there. Now you have Douglas Costa already, who's a right winger, who's a designated player. And he's most likely going to be a starter. I don't think unless the Galaxy get another player with maybe a bigger, higher profile, a player maybe in their prime, I know Santos is only 28, but when I'm talking about somebody maybe like between the age of 25 and 30, especially when it comes to a winger, I think Costa will remain the starter considering his DP tag. It would be really interesting to see if this does happen, if Vanny will choose Santos over Costa. But we will see again if that does happen. But it's definitely an interesting rumor. I think he's a player that again we haven't seen too much of because he hasn't been giving a starting spot. Most of his game sample size is done in the second half of games. He hasn't been a consistent starter since 2021. And I think there's a little bit more questions than there are, solutions that he brings to the Galaxy at the moment because he's a player that, I can name the stats earlier I said about, 2021 where, hey, he scored goals. He was influential for America. He was their top scorer that year, but that was 2 years ago. A lot changes in that time, and it's definitely a gamble, I think, if they choose to pursue it. But if that's the only option available, then that is okay because they do need depth at that position. But at the end of the day, it just depends if the Galaxy will choose to pursue that or if there's still other targets that they're looking at. Again, the transfer window closes in April 24th, if I'm correct, which is the last day that they can make signings that require an ITC because of, the transfer ban that was implemented by MLS in December.
thank you very much, Alex. Well, I guess that's all we were going to have for you tonight. We're over by about 4 minutes. Thank you so much to everybody who tuned in for an initial episode. We'll be back. Well, actually, we're planning on doing a day after pod, so we might hear from you in a couple of days. So until then, thank you so much. Be sure to let us know, any comments or anything. Be patient with us. We know a few coats of paint are missing from this little operation. We got an intro and an outro and music and all sorts of stuff coming. So until then, take it easy. And then this has been Alex, our LA Galaxy beat reporter for The Striker. You can read his articles at The Striker. He just wrote a pretty good exclusive with Joe Tutino. Check it out. Go to the site, get a free trial. It's worth every penny. I guarantee it.